Nothing. They're closing. 1 in 6 is now gone. He ought to get on the job and take care of the needs of the American people so we can open safely.
All right. Your time is up, sir. Well, we are going to get to...
I have to respond to that.
Well, you both had 2 minutes, sir.
Excuse me, he made a statement.
So did you.
People want their schools open. They don't want to be shut down. They don't want their state shut down. They want their restaurants. I look at New York. It's so sad what's happening in New York. It's almost like a ghost town, and I'm not sure it can ever recover what they've done in New York. People want their places open. They want to get back to their lives. They'll be careful, but they want their schools open. I'm the one that brought back football. By the way, I brought back Big Ten football. It was me, and I'm very happy to do it. And people of Ohio are very proud of me. And you know how I found out? When he took
Gentlemen,
the phony
we're going to
ad.
get to your economic plans going forward in a moment. But first, Mr. President, as you well know, there's a new report that in 2016, the year you were elected president, and 2017, your first year as president, that you paid $750 a year in federal income tax each of those years. I know that you pay a lot of other taxes, but I'm asking you the specific question. Is it true that you paid $750 in federal income taxes each of those 2 years?
I paid millions of dollars in taxes, millions of dollars of income tax. And let me just tell you, there was a story in one of the papers. I paid $38 million 1 year. I paid $27 million
Show us your tax
1 year.
returns.
I went... you'll see it as soon as it's finished. You'll see it. You know, if you want to go to the Board of Elections. There's a 118-page or so report that says everything I have, every bank I have, I'm totally under-leveraged because the assets are extremely good, and we have a very, I built a great company.
I'm asking you a specific question, which is...
But let me tell you...
I understand all of that. I understand all of that. No, Mr. President,
Go ahead.
I'm asking you a question. Will you tell us how much you paid in federal income taxes in 2016 and 2017?
Millions of dollars.
You paid millions of dollars?
Millions of dollars,
So
yes.
not 750?
Millions of dollars, and you'll get to see it. And you'll get to see it. But let me just tell you, Chris, let me just tell you something, that it was the tax laws. I don't want to pay tax. Before I came here, I was a private developer. I was a private business people. Like every other private person, unless they're stupid, they go through the laws, and that's what it is. He passed a tax bill that gave us all these privileges for depreciation and for tax credits. We build a building and we get tax credits, like the hotel on Pennsylvania Avenue. You get a massive, which, by the way, was given to me by the Obama administration, if you can believe that. Now, the man got fired right after that happened. But
Vice President Biden, you want to respond?
Yeah, I do want to respond. Look, the tax code that made him put him in a position that he pays less tax than a school teacher makes on the money a school teacher makes is because of him he says he's smart because he can take advantage of the tax code. And he does take advantage of the tax code. That's why I'm going to eliminate the Trump tax cuts. And I'm going to eliminate those tax cuts and make sure that we invest in the people who, in fact, need the help. People out there need help.
But why didn't you do it over the last 25 years?
Because you weren't president. Because you weren't president screwing things up.
You were a senator, and
you're the worst president America has ever had.
Hey,
Come
Joe,
on.
let me just tell you, Joe. I've done more in 47 months. I've done more than you've done in 47 years, Joe. We've done things that you never even thought of doing, including fixing the broken military that you gave me, including taking care of your vets.
Mr. President, we're talking about the economy. I'd like to ask you about your plans going forward because, Mr. Vice President, your economic plan, if you were to be elected president, focuses a lot on big government, big taxes, big spending. I want to focus first on the taxes. You propose more than $4 trillion over a decade in new taxes on individuals making more than $400,000 a year and on corporations. President Trump says that that kind of an increase in taxes is going to hurt the economy as it's just coming out of a recession.
Well, just take a look at what the analysis been done by Wall Street firms. Points out that my economic plan would create 7 million more jobs than his in 4 years, number one. And number two, it would create an additional $1 trillion in economic growth because it would be about buying American. That we're going to make, this federal government spend $600 billion a year on everything from ships to steel to buildings and the like. And under my proposal, we're going to make sure that every penny of that has to be made by a company
But
in
respectfully,
America.
sir, I'm talking about taxes, not spending.
By the way, I'm going to eliminate a significant number of the tax. I'm going to make the corporate tax 28%. It shouldn't be 21%. You have 91 companies, in the Fortune 500 who don't pay a single penny in tax, making billions of dollars.
Why didn't you do it
Billions
before
of
when
dollars.
you were vice president with Obama?
Because you, in fact, passed that. That was
Right.
your tax proposal.
I got it done. And you know what happened?
Yeah, you got it done.
Our economy boomed like it's never boomed
The
before.
economy is
Mr.
busted.
President,
Let me finish.
Mr. President, let me pick up on that. You would continue your free market approach, lower taxes, more deregulation, correct?
Not lower taxes for the American people.
Let me.
Excuse me.
But in Obama's, you talk about the economy booming. It turns out that in Obama's final 3 years as president, more jobs were created, 1.5 million more jobs than in the first 3 years of your presidency.
They had the slowest recovery economic recovery since 1929. It was the slowest recovery. Also, they took over something that was down here. All you had to do is turn on the lights and you pick up a lot. But they had the slowest economic recovery since 1929. Let me tell you about the stock market. When the stock market goes up, that means jobs. It also means 401ks. If you got in, if you ever became president with your ideas, you want to terminate my taxes, I'll tell you what, you'll lose half of the companies that have poured in here will leave, and plenty of companies that are already here, they'll leave for other places. They will leave, and you will have a depression, the likes of which you've never seen.
Look,
Mr.
we
Vice President.
inherited the worst recession short of a depression in American history. I was asked to bring it back. We were able to have an economic recovery that created the jobs you're talking about. We handed him a booming economy. He blew it.
It wasn't
He
booming.
Blew it. He blew it.
It wasn't booming. It was the weakest recovery since 1929.
Is it fair to say he blew it when fact, when there was record low unemployment before COVID?
Yeah, but because what he did, even before COVID, manufacturing went in the hole. Manufacturing went in the hole.
Excuse me, Chris. Wait.
Number two.
Chris.
Number three.
They said it would take. No, you're on number two.
No.
Chris. They said it would take a miracle to bring back manufacturing. I brought back 700,000 jobs. They brought back nothing. They gave up on manufacturing. Part of my standard fare.
I'm the guy that brought back the automobile industry.
All right, let him.
We brought back. I was asked to bring back Chrysler and General Motors. We brought them back right here in the state of Ohio and Michigan. He blew it. They're gone. He blew it. And in fact, they're going.
Ohio had the best year it's ever had last year. Michigan had the best year they've ever had.
That is not
Many
true.
car companies came in from Germany, from Japan, went to Michigan, went to Ohio.
They're not having that.
And they didn't come in with you.
Mr. Vice President, go ahead.
And so you take a look at what he's actually done. He's done very little. His trade deals are the same way. He talks about these great trade deals. You know, he talks about the art of the deal. China's perfected the art of the steal. We have a higher deficit with China now than we did before. We have the highest trade deficit with Mexico.
China ate your lunch, down 18%. China ate your lunch, Joe, and no wonder your son goes in and he takes out billions of dollars. Takes out billions of dollars to manage. He makes millions of dollars. And also, while we're at it, why is it, just out of curiosity, the mayor of Moscow's wife gave your son $3.5 million. What did he do to deserve it? What did he do with Burisma to deserve $183,000?
You've asked your question, let him answer.
None of that is true.
Oh, really? He didn't get $3.5 million?
Mr. President,
Mr.
President, please.
Totally discredited. Totally discredited. And by the way,
well, wait, he didn't get $3.5 million, Joe?
Mr. Vice,
he got $3.5 million.
That is not true.
Oh, really?
Mr. President, it's an open discussion, please.
It's a fact.
Well, you have raised an issue. Let the Vice President answer.
Discredited.
Did Burisma pay him $183,000 a month with no experience in energy?
Mr. President,
my son did nothing wrong at Burisma.
I think he did.
Mr. President, let him answer.
He doesn't want to let me answer because he knows I have the truth. His position has been totally, thoroughly discredited.
By who? The media?
By everybody. Well, by the media, by our allies, by the World Bank, by everyone. has discredited. Matter of fact, even
Mr.
the people
President,
who
please stop.
testified under oath.
So let me
under
ask you
oath,
this,
Henry,
Joe.
under
No,
oath.
go ahead, Mr. I'm listening to
Even
you.
the people under.
He got $3.5 million from Moscow.
He testified under oath in his administration, said, I did my job and I did it very well.
Oh,
I did
really?
it
I'd like to
honorably.
know who they are.
Well, I'll give you the list of the
fire
people who
them.
testified.
No, go ahead, sir.
Sure, you've already fired most of them because they did a good job.
Some people don't
Well,
do a good
here's
job. With you,
Go ahead.
they
You
say-
get
here's the
wait a
deal.
minute. You get the final word, Mr.
Well, it's hard to get any word in with this clown. Excuse me, this
Hey, let me just say, Joe.
No. I'm Mr. President.
$3.5
I'm Mr.
million,
President.
Joe.
That is simply
Why did
not
he
true.
deserve $3.5 million from Moscow?
Look, here's the deal. We want to talk about families and ethics. I don't want to do that. I mean, his family we could talk about all night. His family's
My
already...
family,
No, let him go.
my family
Already
lost
wrote.
a fortune by
Go
coming down
ahead.
and helping
Go
us
ahead.
with
Go ahead,
government.
sir.
And that's such a...
they're right
That's
here.
it, Mr.
That's
President.
such
Every
a great...
single one of them lost
This
a
is not
fortune
about
President.
my
coming and
family or
helping
his
us with
family. It's
government.
about your family,
They
the
didn't
American
collect
people.
$3.5 million
He
for
doesn't.
nothing.
That's not true. It doesn't want to talk about what you need. You, the American people. It's about you. That's what we're talking about
you
here.
should
All right,
Not
that's the end of the
Shouldn't
segment.
take
We're,
the money.
we're moving on.
He didn't take them.
Well,
Vice
it's a very-
President,
but Chris,
no,
can I be honest? It's a very important
Try to be
question.
honest.
No,
He
I-
stood up.
No,
he stood up,
the answer to
and
the
he
question is no.
threatened Ukraine.
No, sir.
With $1 billion,
Sir,
if you don't
that
get rid of
is
the press.
absolutely
You know what? You're
not
stop.
You're on
true.
tape doing it.
You're going to
Not
have
tape.
True.
Gentlemen.
Is-
I hate to raise
Chris,
my voice,
he's
but
on
it seems
tape.
to be, why should I be different than the two of you? So here's the
Got a
deal.
good point.
We have 6 segments. We have ended that segment. We're going to go to the next segment. In that segment, you each are going to have 2 uninterrupted moments. In those 2 uninterrupted minutes, Mr. President, you can say anything you want. I'm going to ask a question about race, but if you want to answer about something else, go ahead. But I think that the country would be better served if we allowed both people to speak with fewer interruptions. I'm appealing to you, sir, to do that.
Well, and him too.
Well, frankly, you've been doing more interrupting
That's
than
all
he
right,
has.
but he does plenty.
Well, less than, sir, less
there's
than.
plenty.
No, less than you have. Let's please continue on. The issue of race. Vice President Biden, you say that President Trump's response to the violence in
Guys, what do you
Charlottesville
think is
3
going
years
on
ago,
right now? I
when he
think Chris
talked about
Wallace
very
is
fine people
playing
on
himself
both
too
sides,
much.
was what directly led you to launch this run for president.
Oh, yeah, sure.
President Trump, you have often said that you believe you have done more for Black Americans than any president, with the possible exception of Abraham Lincoln. My question for the two of you is, why should voters trust you rather than your opponent to deal with the race issues facing this country over the next 4 years? Vice President Biden, you go first.
It's about equity and equality. It's about decency. It's about the Constitution. And we have never walked away from trying to require equity for everyone, equality for the whole of America. But we've never accomplished it. But we've never walked away from it like he has done. It is true. The reason I got in the race is when those people, close your eyes, remember what those people look like coming out of the fields carrying torches.
I'm sorry to say
their
this,
legs
but
bulging,
Biden looks like
spewing,
he's
just
whooping
spewing
ass, you know?
anti-Semitic bile, and accompanied by the Ku
He's
Klux
doing
Klan.
good
A
so
young woman
far.
got killed. And they asked the president what he thought. He said there were very fine people on both sides. No president's ever said anything like that.
Very nice people on both sides,
Now,
except for the neo-Nazis
Second point I'd make to you
and all the
is
other
that
stuff. That's
when
debunked.
Floyd was
All
killed.
right?
When Mr. Floyd was killed, there was a peaceful protest in front of the White House. What did he do? He came out of his bunker, had the military use tear gas on him. So
It
he could
wasn't a
walk
peaceful
across
protest.
to a church
People
and
got
hold up
hurt
the
there.
Bible. And then what happened after that?
Don't lie.
The bishop of that very church said that it was a disgrace. The general who was with him said all he ever wants to do is divide people, not unite people at all. This is a president who has used everything as a dog whistle to try to generate
Chris Wallace
racist
should fix
hatred,
that
racist
shit because
division. This is
he
a
knows
man
it's
who,
a
in fact,
hoax.
you talk about helping African Americans. 1 in 1,000 African Americans has been killed because of the coronavirus. And if he doesn't do something quickly, by
Because
the
of the
end of the
10th
year,
Amendment.
1 in 500
The president
will have
doesn't
been
control
killed.
the
1 in
states.
500 African
It's
Americans.
illegal
This
for him to
man-
cross
this man
in without
is a savior of African Americans. This
the
man
permission of
cares
the
at all.
governors.
This
It's in the
man's done virtually
Constitution, the
nothing.
10th Amendment.
Look, the fact is that you have to look at what he talks about. You have to look at what he did. And what he did has been disastrous for the African American community.
So
President Trump, you have 2 minutes. Why should Americans trust you over your opponent to deal with
He
racism?
did a crime bill, 1994, where you call them super predators, African Americans, the super predators, and they've never forgotten it. They've never forgotten it, Joe.
No, sir, it's his 2 minutes.
So you did that, and they call you a super predator, and I'm letting people out of jail now that you have treated the African American population community, you have
That is
treated the
true.
black community
That is
about as
true.
bad as anybody in this country. You did the 1990, and that's why, if you look at the polls, I'm doing better than any Republican has done in a long time because they saw what you did. You call them super predators, and you've called them worse than that. Because you look back at your testimony over the years, you've called them a lot worse than that. As far as the church is concerned, and as far as the generals are concerned, we just got the support of 250 military leaders and generals, total support. Law enforcement, almost every law enforcement group in the United States. I have Florida, I have Texas, I have Ohio, I have Portland. The sheriff just came out today and he said, I support President Trump. I don't think you have any law enforcement. You can't even say the word law enforcement because if you say those words, you're going to lose all of your radical left supporters. And why aren't you saying those words, Joe? Why don't you say the words law enforcement? Because you know what? If they called us in Portland, we would put out that fire in a half an hour, but they won't do it because they're run by radical left Democrats. If you look at Chicago, if you look at any place you want to look, Seattle, they heard we were coming in the following day, and they put up their hands, and we got back Seattle. Minneapolis, we got it back, Joe, because we believe in law and order, but you don't. The top 10 cities and just about the top 40 cities are run by Democrats and in many cases radical left, and they've got you wrapped around their finger, Joe, to a point where you don't want to say anything about law and order. And I'll tell you what, the people of this country want and demand law and order, and you're afraid to even say it.
All right.
Remember to tell them
I
about
want
the
to return
nice
to the
people,
question
man,
of race.
that you
Vice
denounced
President Biden, after the grand
KKK,
jury in the Breonna
Antifa,
Taylor
and the
case
neo-Nazis.
decided not to charge any of the police with homicide, you said it raises the question, quote, whether justice could be equally applied in America. Do you believe that there is a separate but unequal system of justice for blacks in this country?
Yes, there is. There's systemic injustice in this country, in education and work and in law enforcement and the way in which it's enforced. But look, the vast majority of police officers are good, decent, honorable men and women. They risk their lives every day to take care of us. But there are some bad apples. And when they occur, when they find them, they have to be sorted out. They have to be held accountable. They have to be held accountable. And what I'm going to do as President of the United States is call together an entire group of people at the White House, well, everything from the civil rights groups to the police officers, to the police chiefs, and we're going to work this out. We're going to work this out so we change the way in which we have more transparency in when these things happen. These cops aren't happy to see what happened to George Floyd. These cops aren't happy to see what happened to Breonna Taylor. Most don't like it. But we have to have a system where people are held accountable. And by the way, violence in response is never appropriate. Never appropriate. Peaceful protest is. Violence is never appropriate.
All right,
What is peaceful protest? When they run through the middle of a town and burn down your stores and kill people all over the place,
that
and you
is
say
not
peaceful
peaceful
protest?
President Trump,
No, it's
I'm not
not,
asking-
but you say it is.
President
not
Trump, I'd
say-
like to continue with the
Yes,
issue
go
of
ahead,
race. I
please.
promise we're going to get to the issue of law and order in a moment.
Fine.
This month, your administration directed federal agencies to end racial sensitivity training that addresses white privilege or critical race theory. Why did you decide to do that, to end racial sensitivity training? And do you believe that there is systemic racism in this country, sir?
I ended it because it's racist. I ended it because a lot of people were complaining that they were asked to do things that were absolutely insane, that it was a radical revolution that was taking place in our military, in our schools, all over the place, and you know it, and so does everybody
what
else.
Is radical,
and he would know.
What is
Oh, it was
radical
totally
about
racist.
racial sensitivity training, sir?
If you were a certain person, you had no status in life. It was sort of a reversal. And if you look at the people, we were paying people hundreds of thousands of dollars to teach very bad ideas and frankly very sick ideas. And really, they were teaching people to hate our country. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to allow that to happen. We have to go back to the core values of this country. They were teaching people that our country is a horrible place, it's a racist place, and they were teaching people to hate our country. And I'm not going to allow that to happen.
Vice President Biden?
Nobody's doing that. He's the racist.
You just don't know.
Here's the deal. I know a lot more about
You
this
don't
than he
know.
does.
Good, let him finish.
The fact is that there is racial insensitivity. People have to be made aware of what other people feel like, what insults them, what is demeaning to them. It's important that people know they don't want to. Many people don't want to hurt other people's feelings, but it makes a big difference. It makes a gigantic difference in the way a child is able to grow up and have a sense of self-esteem. It's a little bit like how this guy and his friends look down on so many people. They look down their nose on people like Irish Catholics like me and grew up in Scranton. They look down on people who don't have money. They look down on people who are of a different faith. They look down on people who are a different color. In fact, we're all Americans. The only way we're going to bring this country together is bring everybody together. There's nothing we cannot do if we do it together. We can take this on and we can defeat racism in America.
President Trump, sir.
During the Obama-Biden administration, there was tremendous division. There was hatred. You look at Ferguson, you go to many places. Look at Oakland. Look what happened in Oakland. Look what happened in Baltimore. Look what happened. Frankly, it was more violent than what I'm even seeing now.
Oh, my
but
Lord.
the reason is that
ridiculous.
the Democrats that run these
Absolutely
cities
ridiculous.
don't want to talk like you about law and order.
Violent
and you
crime,
still haven't mentioned.
violent
Are you in
crime.
favor of law and order?
I'm in favor of law. You follow
Are you in favor of law and order? Go
Yes, I'm
ahead,
in
say it.
favor.
You asked a
Everybody's in favor
question,
of
let him finish.
Law
He
and order.
loses
Law
left.
and
No,
order.
let him answer.
Law and order with justice, where people get treated fairly. And the fact of the matter is, violent crime went down 17%, 15% in our administration.
All right.
It's gone up on his watch.
Went down much more in ours.
All right, we're now.
is president of the
Mr. President,
United
you're going
States
to.
of America.
We
Mr.
were
President,
breaking every
you're-
record in the
Mr.
book.
President, you're going to be very happy because
And
we're now going to talk about law and order.
Places we had trouble were Democratic-run cities.
That's
and
exactly
so-
my question.
Democratic-
There has been a dramatic increase in homicides in America this summer particularly, and you often blame that on Democratic mayors and Democratic governors, but in fact there have been equivalent spikes in Republican-led cities like Tulsa and Fort Worth. So the question is this really a party issue?
I think it's a party issue. You can bring in a couple of examples, but if you look at Chicago, what's going on in Chicago, where 53 people were shot and 8 died, shot. If you look at New York, where it's going up like nobody's ever seen anything, the numbers are going up 100, 150, 200%. Crime. It is
cities.
crazy what's going on. And he doesn't want to say law and order because he can't, because he'll lose his radical left supporters. And once he does that, it's over with. But if he ever got to run this country and they ran it the way he would want to run it, we would have, our suburbs would be gone. By the way, our suburbs would be gone. And you would see problems like you've never seen.
He wouldn't know a suburb unless he took a wrong turn.
Oh, I know suburbs.
He would not.
So much
I was
better.
raised,
Go ahead, wait a minute.
I was raised in the suburbs. This is not 1950. All these dog whistles on racism don't work anymore. Suburbs are by and large integrated. There's many people today driving their kids to soccer practice and or to black and white and Hispanic in the same car as there have been any time in the past. What really is a threat to the suburbs and their safety is his failure to deal with COVID. They're dying in the suburbs. His failure to deal with the environment. They're being flooded. They're being burned out because his refusal to do anything. That's why the suburbs are in trouble.
I do want to talk about this issue of law and order, though. And in the joint recommendation that came from the Biden-Bernie Sanders task force, you talked about, quote, reimagining policing. First of all, what does reimagining policing mean, and do you support?
It means.
Let me, if I might finish the question. What does reimagining policing mean, and do you support the Black Lives Matter call for community control of policing?
Look, what I support is the police having the opportunity to deal with the problems they face. And I'm totally opposed to defunding the police offices. As a matter of fact, local police, The only one defunding it, his budget calls for a $400 million cut in local law enforcement assistance. They need more assistance. They need, when they show up for a 9/11 call, to have someone with them as a psychologist or psychiatrist to keep them from having to use force and be able to talk people down. We have to have community policing like we had before, where the officers get to know the people in the communities. That's when crime went down. It didn't go up, it went down. And so we have to be engaged.
That's not what they're talking about, Chris. That's not what he's talking about, defunding the police.
That is not true.
He doesn't have any law support.
Look,
he has no law enforcement
that's not
support.
true.
Almost
That's
nothing.
Look.
Oh, really? Who do you have? Name one group that supports you. Name one group that came out and supported you. Go ahead. Think. We have time.
We don't have time to do
No,
anything.
think
All right.
about it. Name
folks,
one law enforcement group that came out and supported
I think, gentlemen,
you.
I think I'm going to take back the
There
moderator's
aren't. I don't
role,
think there are any.
and I want to get to another subject, which is the issue of protests in many cities that have turned violent. In Portland, Oregon, especially, we had more than 100 straight days of protests, which I think you would agree. You talk about peaceful protests. Many of those turned into riots. Mr. Vice President, you say that people who commit crimes should be held accountable. The question I have, though, is, as the Democratic nominee, and earlier tonight you said that you are the Democratic Party right now, have you ever called the Democratic mayor of Portland or the Democratic governor of Oregon and said, hey, you got to stop this, bring in the National Guard, do whatever it takes, but you stop the days and months of violence in Portland?
I don't hold public office now. I am a former vice president. I've made it clear in my public statements that the violence should be prosecuted. It should be prosecuted, and anyone who commits it
But
should
you've
be
never
prosecuted.
called for the people, the leader. Excuse me, sir. You had never called for the leaders in Portland and in Oregon to bring in the National Guard and knock off 100 days of riots.
They can, in fact, take care of it if he just stay out of the way. Look here.
Oh, really?
Here,
Oh, really?
Here's the
Well,
thing.
I sent in the U.S.
I asked him a
Marshals
question.
to get the killer of the young man in the middle of the street. They shot him, and for 3 days,
President Trump,
Portland wouldn't do anything. I had to send in the U.S. Marshals.
President
They
Trump,
took care of business.
Go ahead, sir.
And by the way, you know, his own former spokesperson said, you know, riots and chaos and violence help his cause. That's what this is all about.
I don't know who said that.
I do.
Who?
I think Kellyanne Conway.
I don't think she said that.
She said that.
don't-
And so here's the
All right.
But here's the point.
Go ahead.
The point is that that's what he is, keeps trying to rile everything up. He doesn't want to calm things down. Instead of going in and talking to people and saying, let's get everybody together, figure out how to deal with this. What's he do? He just pours gasoline in the fire constantly, every single solitary time.
Okay, and to end this, button up this segment, I'm going to give you a minute to answer, sir. You have repeatedly criticized.
I have to answer his statement.
You have
His
repeatedly.
statement. Wait,
You have
just one
no.
second.
You've been talking back
made
and
a
forth.
statement.
I'm asking you.
I would love to
you know,
end it.
sir.
I would love to end it, and
You
we
know, if
would
you want to
very-
switch seats,
We would very quickly.
We can do that, but
I'd
I'm
send
no.
in
I'm-
the National Guard, it would be over. There'd be no problem.
Okay,
But they
good.
don't want to accept the National Guard.
You have repeatedly criticized the vice president for not specifically calling out Antifa and other left-wing
That's right.
extremist groups. But are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups and to say that they need to stand down and not add to the violence in a number of these cities, as we saw in Kenosha and as we've seen in Portland?
Sure,
are you
I'm
prepared
willing to do
specifically
that, but
do it?
Well,
I
go
would
ahead,
say
sir.
I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing, not from the right wing.
what are you- what
If
are you-
look,
what are you saying?
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see
Well,
peace.
then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it.
Do you want to call him? What do you want to call him? Give me a name. Give me a
White
name. Go ahead.
supremacists
What
and
would
white
you like me to condemn?
White
Proud Boys.
supremacists and right-wing
Proud
militia.
Boys, stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what. Somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left, because this is not a right-wing problem.
His
This
own
is a left-wing.
FBI director
This
said
is a
the threat
left-wing
on
problem.
white
Go ahead, sir.
supremacists. Antifa's an idea, not an organization.
you gotta be
not
kidding.
militia. That's what
Oh,
his
it's an idea.
FBI, FBI director
Gentlemen,
said.
Well,
we're
then
gonna,
you know what?
no,
He's wrong.
we're done, sir. We're moving on to the next.
Everybody
We're
gives
moving.
you
When a bat
advice
hits
in
you
your
over the head, that's
administration.
not an idea.
Everybody in
Antifa
your
is
administration tells you the truth has a bad idea.
Can I tell you what?
You have no ideas that are
Antifa is a dangerous
All right,
radical
gentlemen,
group.
we're now moving on to the Trump
And
and
you ought to be
Biden
careful with
records.
them. They'll overthrow you.
When
in
a
2
president,
seconds.
I'm going to ask a question. When the president seeks a second term, it is generally a referendum on his record. But Vice President Biden, you like to quote one of your dad's sayings, which is, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. And in this case, sir, you are the alternative. Looking at both of your records, I'm going to ask each of you, why should voters elect you president over your opponent? In this segment, President Trump, you go first, 2 minutes.
Because there has never been an administration or president who has done more than I've done in a period of 3.5 years. And that's despite the impeachment hoax. And you saw what happened today with Hillary Clinton, where it was a whole big con job. But despite going through all of these things where I had to fight both flanks and behind me and above, there has never been an administration that's done what I've done. The greatest, before COVID came in, the greatest economy in history, lowest unemployment numbers. Everything was good. Everything was going. And by the way, there was unity going to happen. People were calling me for the first time in years. They were calling and they were saying, it's time maybe. And then what happened? We got hit, but now we're building it back up again. A rebuilding of the military, including Space Force and all of the other things. A fixing of the VA, which was a mess under him. 308,000 people died because they didn't have proper health care. He was a mess. And we now got a 91% approval rating at the VA, our vets. We take care of our vets. But we've rebuilt our military. The job that we've done, and I'll tell you some people say maybe the most important. By the end of the first term, I'll have approximately
That is true, because we ended up getting a raise in the military, and the VA is way better now. We don't got to wait 6 months for an appointment. We get within 2 to 3 days to see a doctor.
The likes of which very few people, and you know one
And
of the
the
reasons I
economy
have
is
so
so
many
great
judges,
also.
because President Obama and him left me 128 judges to fill. When you leave office, you don't leave any judges. That's like, you just don't do that. They left 128 openings, and if I were a member of his party, because they have a little different philosophy, I'd say if you left us 128 openings, you can't be a good president, you can't be a good vice president. But
He
I want
has
to
done a
thank you
whole
because it
bunch
gives
of
us
stuff
almost,
in 3.5
it'll probably
years.
be
That is
above that
true.
number by the end of this
Fixed the
term.
military.
300 judges, it's a record.
Put a whole bunch
Looking
of
at both
judges
your
on the
records,
seats.
why should
Did the
voters
3
elect
scoops
you
president,
as opposed to
and
President
then on
Trump?
top
You have
of
2
that,
minutes
fix the
uninterrupted.
economy.
Under this president, we become weaker,
We haven't become weaker because everybody has
more
respect us.
divided,
Plus
and more
now
violent.
everybody's scared of
When
us
I
the way
was
they should be,
vice president,
you know?
we inherited a recession.
And they're
I was
making
asked to
everybody
fix
that
it. I
owe us
did.
money
He left
pay
in a
us the money
booming
back.
economy, and he caused the recession. With regard to being weaker, the fact is that I've gone head to head with Putin and made it clear to him we're not going to take any of his stuff. He's Putin's puppy. He still refuses to even say anything to Putin about the bounty on the heads of American soldiers.
Your son got
And-
$3.5 million.
That's right. And by the way, my son.
Wait a minute. Mr. President, your campaign agreed to both sides would get 2-minute answers uninterrupted. Well, your side agreed to it, and why don't you observe what your campaign agreed to as a ground rule, okay, sir?
He never keeps his word. Can
Because-
you add back
No,
He's
I'm
a
not
person
asking.
that's
That
not
was a
yelling.
rhetorical question.
Can you
Go
add
ahead,
back
sir.
30 seconds?
Yes,
Okay.
you may have.
All right.
Go ahead.
So, thirdly, we're poor. The billionaires have gotten much more wealthy by a tune of over $300 to $400 billion more just since COVID. You in the home, you got less. You're in more trouble than you were before. In terms of being more violent, when we were in office, there were 15% less violence in America than there is today. He's president of the United States. It's on his watch. And with regard to more divided, the nation can't stay divided. We can't be this way. And speaking of my son, the way you talk about the military, the way you talk about them being losers and being and just being suckers. My son was in Iraq. He spent a year there. He got the Bronze Star. He got the Conspicuous Service Medal. He was not a loser. He was a patriot, and the people left behind there were heroes.
Really?
And I resent.
Are you talking
like
about
hell.
Hunter? Are you talking about
I'm
Hunter?
talking about my son, Bo Biden. You're talking about.
I don't know Bo. I know Hunter.
Yeah, you
Hunter
know
got
Bo.
thrown. Hunter got thrown out of the military. He was thrown out, dishonorably discharged.
That's not true. He
For
wasn't dishonorably
cocaine use. And he didn't have a job until you became vice president. And once you
None of
became
that
vice
is
president,
true.
he made a fortune in Ukraine, in China, in Moscow,
That is simply
and various
not
other places.
true.
He
My
made a
son,
fortune.
my son,
And he didn't have a job.
my son, like a lot of people we know at home, had a drug problem. He's overtaken it. He's
That is
fixed
not
it.
true.
He's worked
There
on it,
hasn't been
and I'm
no
proud of him.
bounties.
But why
I'm
was he
proud of
given
my
tens
son.
of
And then on
millions?
top
He
of
wasn't
that,
given
All right,
tens of
Hunt,
millions of
he
dollars.
got dishonorable discharge. He got thrown out of the military.
We've already been through.
Totally discredited.
We've already been through this. I think the American people would rather hear.
Chris
about
Waters
more
is doing a
substantial
bad
subjects.
job.
Well, you know,
He's
as a
letting
moderator,
Biden
sir,
speak,
I'm gonna
but
make
not
a
Trump
judgment
speak.
call
Somebody
here.
gets $3.5 million
Okay, right.
from the
Let's talk
mayor
about-
of Moscow.
That
talk
is
about-
not
I think
true.
it's a terrible
That
thing.
report is totally
Why did he get
discredited.
it?
I
Mitt
think,
Romney on that committee said it wasn't worth taxpayers' money, that report. It was written for political reasons.
you know, I'd like to talk about climate change.
So would I.
Let him
The
respond to
forest
the same
fires in the West
question.
are raging now. They have burned millions of acres. They have displaced hundreds of thousands of people. When state officials there blame the fires on climate change, Mr. President, you said, I don't think the science knows. Over your 4 years, you have pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord. You have rolled back a number of Obama environmental records. What do you believe about the science of climate change, and what will you do in the next 4 years to confront it?
I want crystal clean water and air. I want beautiful clean air. We have now the lowest carbon. If you look at our numbers right now, we are doing phenomenally. But I haven't destroyed our businesses. Our businesses aren't put out of commission. If you look at the Paris Accord, it was a disaster from our standpoint. And people are actually very happy about what's going on because our businesses are doing well. As far as the fires are concerned, you need forest management in addition to everything else. The forest floors are loaded up with trees, dead trees that are years old, and they're like tinder, and leaves and everything else. You drop a cigarette in there, the whole forest burns down. You've got to have forest management.
What do you
You've got to have cuts.
What do you believe about the science of climate change, sir?
I believe that we have to do everything we can to have immaculate
That is
air,
correct,
immaculate water,
because
and do
Texas
whatever
got a
else we
whole
can.
bunch
That's good.
of
You know, we're planting a
open
billion
forest
trees,
land.
the Billion
So
Tree
does
Project,
Florida,
and
so
it's
there's
very
never
exciting.
fire
A lot
there.
of people-
It's only in California.
Pollution, greenhouse gas emissions contributes to the global warming of
Let
the
him
A
planet.
lot of
speak,
things do, but I
Chris.
think to an extent, yes. I think to an extent, yes. But I also think we have to do better management of our forests. Every year, I get the call, California's burning. California's burning. If that was cleaned, if you had forest management, good forest management, you wouldn't be getting those calls. You know, in Europe, they have forest cities. They're called forest cities. They maintain their forests. They manage their forests. I was with the head of a major country. It's a forest city. He said, sir, we have trees that are far more, they ignite much easier than California. There shouldn't be that problem. I spoke with the governor about it. I'm getting along very well with the governor. But I said, you know, at some point, you can't every year have hundreds of thousands of acres of land just burned to the ground.
But, sir,
That's burning down because of a lack of
But,
management.
sir, if you believe in the science of climate change, why have you rolled back the Obama Clean Power Plan, which limited carbon emissions in power plants? Why have you relaxed?
Because it was driving energy prices through the sky.
Why have you relaxed fuel economy standards that are going to create more pollution from cars
Well,
and
not
trucks?
really, because what's happening is the car is much less expensive and it's a much safer car, and you're talking about a tiny difference. And then what would happen, because of the cost of the car, you would have at least double and triple the number of cars purchased. We have the old slugs out there that are 10, 12 years old. If you did that, the car would be safer, it would be much cheaper by
But in the case of
$3,500.
California, they've simply
No, but you
ignored
would take
your
a lot of cars
rollback.
off the market because people would be able to afford a car. Now, and by the way, we're going to see how that turns out. But a lot of people agree with me, many people. The car has gotten so expensive because they have computers all over the place for an extra little bit of gasoline. And and I'm okay with electric cars too. I think I'm all for electric cars. I've given big incentives for electric cars. But what they've done in California is just crazy.
Vice President Biden, I'd like you to respond to the president's climate change record, but I also want to ask you about a concern. You proposed $2 trillion in green jobs. You talk about new limits, not abolishing, but new limits on fracking, ending the use of fossil fuels to generate electricity by 2035, and zero net emission of greenhouse gases by 2050. The president says a lot of these things would tank the economy and cost millions of jobs.
He's absolutely wrong, number one. Number two, if in fact, during our administration, the Recovery Act, I was in charge, able to bring down the cost of renewable energy to cheaper than or as cheap as coal and gas and oil. Nobody's going to build another coal-fired plant in America. No one's going to build another oil-fired plant in America. They're going to move to renewable energy, number one. Number two, we're going to make sure that we are able to take the federal fleet and turn it into a fleet that's run on their electric vehicles. Making sure that we can do that, we're going to put 500,000 charging stations and all of the highways that we're going to be building in the future. We're going to build an economy that, in fact, is going to provide for the ability us to take 4 million buildings and make sure that they, in fact, are weatherized in a way that, in fact, they'll emit significantly less gas and oil because the heat will not be going out. There's so many things that we can do now to create thousands and thousands of jobs. We can get to net zero in terms of energy production by 2035. Not only not costing people jobs, creating millions of good paying jobs, not $15 an hour, but prevailing wage, by having a new infrastructure that in fact is green. And the first thing I will do, I will rejoin the Paris Accord. I will join the Paris Accord because with us out of it, look what's happening. It's all falling apart. And talk about someone who has no relationship with foreign policy. Brazil, the rainforests of Brazil are being torn down, are being ripped down. More carbon is absorbed in that rainforest than every bit of carbon that's emitted in the United States. Instead of doing something about that, I would be gathering up and making sure we had the countries of the world coming up with $20 billion. Say, here's $20 billion. Stop tearing down the forest. And if you don't, then you're going to have significant economic consequences.
What about the argument that President Trump basically says that you have to balance environmental interests and economic interess, and he's drawn his line?
Well, he hadn't drawn a line. He still, for example, he wants to make sure that methane's not a problem. You can now emit more methane without it being a problem. Methane. This is a guy who says that you don't have to have mileage standards for automobiles that exist now. This is a guy who says that, well, the fact is, it's all true. And here's the deal.
He's talking about the Green New Deal, and it's not $2 billion or $20 billion, as you said. It's $100 trillion.
I'm talking about
where they want to rip down buildings and rebuild the building.
No,
it's the dumbest, most ridiculous. Where airplanes are out of business, where two-car systems are out, where they want to take out the cows too. That's not true either, right? This is a $100 trillion. Look, that's more money than our country could make in 100 years if we're going by
the case.
All right, let me because I actually, wait a minute, sir. I actually have studied your plan, and it includes upgrading 4 million buildings, weatherizing 2 million homes over 4 years, building 1.5 million energy-efficient homes. So the question becomes, the president is saying, I think some people who support the president would say that sounds like it's going to cost a lot of money and hurt the economy.
What it's going to do is going to create thousands and millions of jobs, good-paying jobs.
Let him finish, sir.
He doesn't know how to do that.
$100 billion.
The fact is, it's going to create millions of good-paying jobs, and these tax incentives for people to weatherize, which he wants to get rid of. It's going to make the economy much safer. Look how much we're paying now to deal with the hurricanes. By the way, he has an answer for hurricanes. He said maybe we should drop a nuclear weapon on them. They may.
I never said that.
That's what he did say.
You made it up.
And here's the deal.
You make up.
We are going to be in a position where we can create hard, good jobs by making sure the environment is clean and we all are in better shape. We spend billions of dollars now, on floods, hurricanes, rising seas. We're in real trouble. Look what's happened just in the Midwest with these storms that come through and wipe out entire sections and counties in Iowa. They didn't happen before. They're because of global warming. We make up 15% of the world's problem. But the rest of the world, we've got to get them to come along. That's why we have to get back into the Paris Accord.
All right, gentlemen,
Wait a minute, Chris. So why didn't he do it for 47 years? You were vice president. Why didn't you get the world? China sends up real dirt into the air. Russia does, India does, they all do. We're supposed to be good. And by the way, he made a couple of statements. The Green New Deal is $100 trillion,
That is
not
not
20
my
billion.
plan.
That's
the Green
well,
New
you want to
Deal
rebuild every
is
building.
not my plan.
I want to rebuild every.
If he knew anything about,
wait.
if he
Gentlemen,
knew
He
anything
made a
about,
statement about the military. He said I said something about the military. He and his friends made it up, and then they went with it. I never said it.
Okay.
That is
What
not
he
true.
did
Sir,
is he
you're done in
said
this segment.
he called
Mr.
the
Vice-
military
Mr. Vice President,
stupid bastards.
I
and he
did
said
not
it on
say
tape.
that.
He said
Mr.
stupid
Please,
bastards. He
sir,
said it.
stop.
I would never
I
say
would
that. to
play
the
it.
military.
Play it.
Go ahead.
You're
Mr.
on
Vice
tape.
President answered his final question.
The final question is, I can't remember which of all his rantings.
I'm having a little trouble myself, but and about the economy and about this question of what it's going to cost.
The economy.
I mean, the Green New Deal and the idea of what your environmental
Green New
changes
Deal-
will do.
The Green New Deal will pay for itself as we move forward. We're not going to build plants that, in fact, are great polluting plants.
Do you
We're going to
support
build
the Green New Deal?
Pardon me?
Do you support?
No, I don't support the Green
Oh,
New Deal.
you don't? Oh, well, that's a
You
big
let-
statement.
I
That
support
means you
the
just
Biden-
lost the radical left.
I
Done.
support
Oh, you
the
don't?
Biden plan that I put forward.
Okay.
The Biden plan, which is different than what he calls the radical Green New Deal.
All right, gentlemen, final segment, election integrity. As we meet tonight, millions of Americans are receiving mail-in ballots or going to vote early. How confident should we be that this will be a fair election? And what are you prepared to do over the next 5+ weeks, because it'll not only be to Election Day, but also counting some ballots, mail-in ballots after Election Day. What are you prepared to do to reassure the American people that the next president will be the legitimate winner of this election? In this final segment, Mr. Vice President, you go first.
Prepared to let people vote. They should go to iwillvote.com, decide how they're going to vote, when they're going to vote, and what means by which they're going to vote. His own Homeland Security Director, and as well as the FBI Director, says there is no evidence at all that mail-in ballots are a source of being manipulated and cheating. They said that. The fact is that there are going to be millions of people because of COVID that are going to be voting by mail-in ballots, like he does, by the way. He sits behind the Resolute desk and sends his ballot to Florida, number one. Number two, we're going to make sure that those people who want to vote in person are able to vote because enough poll watchers are there to make sure they can socially distance. The polls are open on time, and the polls stay open until the votes are counted. And this is all about trying to dissuade people from voting because he's trying to scare people into thinking that it's not going to be legitimate. Show up and vote. You will determine the outcome of this election. Vote, vote, vote. If you're able to vote early in your state, vote early. If you're able to vote in person, vote in person. Vote whatever way is the best way for you, because he cannot stop you from being able to determine the outcome of this election. And in terms of whether or not when the votes are counted, and they're all counted, that will be accepted. If I win, that will be accepted. If I lose, that'll be accepted. But by the way, if in fact he says he's not sure what he's going to accept, well, let me tell you something. It doesn't matter, because if we get the votes, it's going to be all over. He's going to go. He can't stay in power. It won't happen. It won't happen. So vote. Just make sure you understand you have it in your control to determine what this country is going to look like the next 4 years. Is it going to change, or you get 4 more years of these lies?
Mr. President, 2 minutes.
So when I listened to Joe talking about a transition, there's been no transition from when I won. I won that election. And if you look at crooked Hillary Clinton, if you look at all of the different people, there was no transition, because they came after me trying to do a coup. They came after me spying on my campaign. They started from the day I won, and even before I won, from the day I came down the escalator with our First Lady. They were a disaster. They were a disgrace to our country. And we've caught them. We've caught them all. We've got it all on tape. We've caught them all. And by the way, you gave the idea for the Logan Act against General Flynn. You better take a look at that, because we caught you in a sense, and President Obama was sitting in the office. He knew about it too. So don't tell me about a free transition. As far as the ballots are concerned, it's a disaster. A solicited ballot, okay, solicited is okay. You're soliciting, you're asking, they send it back, you send it back. I did that. If you have an unsolicited, they're sending millions of ballots all over the country. There's fraud. They found them in creeks. They found some with the name Trump, just happened to have the name Trump just the other day in a waste paper basket. They're being sent all over the place. They sent 2 in a Democrat area. They sent out 1,000 ballots. Everybody got 2 ballots. This is going to be a fraud like you've never seen. The other thing, it's nice on November 3rd, you're watching and you see who won the election. And I think we're going to do well because people are really happy with the job we've done. But you know what? We won't know. We might not know for months because these ballots are going to be all over. Take a look at what happened in Manhattan. Take a look at what happened in New Jersey. Take a look at what happened in Virginia and other places. They're not losing 2%, 1%, which, by the way, is too much. An election could be won or lost with that. They're losing 30 and 40%. It's a fraud, and it's a shame. And can you imagine where they say, you have to have your ballot in by November 10th. November 10th. That means that's 7 days after the election, in theory, should have been announced.
Okay.
We have major states with that.
Sir,
all run by Democrats.
2 minutes is 2 minutes.
All run by Democrats. It's
President Trump,
it's a rigged election.
You're going to be able to continue. You have been charging for months that mail-in balloting is going to be a disaster. You say it's rigged, that it's going to lead to fraud. But in 2018, in the last midterm election, 31 million people voted mail-in voting. That was a quarter, more than a quarter of all the voters that year cast their ballots by mail. Now that millions of mail-in ballots have gone out, what are you going to do about it? And are you counting on the Supreme Court, including a Justice Barrett, to settle any dispute?
Yeah, I think I'm counting on them to look at the ballots, definitely. I hope we don't need them in terms of the election itself. But for the ballots, I think so, because what's happening is incredible. I read today, where at least 1% of the ballots for 2016 were invalidated. They take them, we don't like them, we don't like them.
But what are you going to do about it? There are millions of ballots going out right now.
What you do is you go and vote. You do a solicited ballot, and that's okay, or you go and vote.
I'm asking you about the fact that millions of people...
You go and vote. You go and vote.
But what I'm saying is, what are you going to do about the fact that millions of people...
You either do, Chris, a solicited ballot where you're sending it in, they're sending it back, and you're sending... They have mailmen with lots of it. Did you see what's going on? Take a look at West Virginia, mailmen selling the ballots. They're being sold. They're being dumped in rivers. This is a horrible thing for our country. This is not going to end well.
There is no evidence
This is
of that.
not going to end well.
5 states have had mail-in ballots for the last decade or more. 5, including 2 Republican states. And you don't have to solicit the ballot. It's sent to you. It's sent to your home. What they're saying is that it has to be a postmark by election day. If it doesn't get in till the 7th, 8th, 9th, it still should be counted. He's just afraid of counting the votes because
You're wrong. You're wrong.
I want to continue with you on this, Vice President Biden.
Chris, he's so wrong when he makes a statement like that.
Excuse me. Vice President Biden, the biggest problem, in fact, over the years with mail-in voting has not been fraud historically. It has been that sizable numbers, sometimes hundreds of thousands of ballots are thrown out because they have not been properly filled out, or there is some other irregularity, or they missed the deadline. So the question I have is, are you concerned that the Supreme Court with a Justice Barrett will settle any dispute?
I'm concerned that any court would settle this because here's the deal. When you get a ballot and you fill it out, you're supposed to have an affidavit. If you didn't know, you have someone say that this is me. You should be able to, if in fact you can verify that's you before the ballot is thrown out, that's sufficient to be able to count the ballot because someone made a mistake and not dotting the correct I. Who they voted for, testify, say who they voted for, say it's you, that is totally legitimate.
All right.
Excuse me, Chris, when you have 80 million ballots
I have a final
sent in
question.
and swamping the system, you know it can't be done. You know it can't, and already there's been
so
fraud.
now
mail service delivers 185 million pieces of mail a day.
In 8 states, we can keep talking. In 8 states, election workers are prohibited currently by law, 8 states, from even beginning to process ballots, even take them out of the envelopes and flatten them until Election Day. That means that it's likely, because there's going to be a huge increase in mail-in balloting, that we are not going to know on election night who the winner is, that it could be days, it could be weeks.
Could be months.
Until we find out who the new president is. So first for you, sir, finally for the vice president, I hope neither of you will interrupt the other. Will you urge your supporters to stay calm during this extended period, not to engage in any civil unrest? And will you pledge tonight that you will not declare victory until the election has been independently certified? President Trump, you go first.
I'm urging my supporters to go into the polls and watch very carefully, because that's what has to happen. I am urging them to do it. As you know, today there was a big problem. In Philadelphia, they went in to watch. They're called poll watchers, a very safe, very nice thing. They were thrown out. They weren't allowed to watch. You know why? Because bad things happen in Philadelphia, bad things. And I am urging my people. I hope it's going to be a fair election. If it's a fair election,
them what?
I am 100% on board. But if I see tens of thousands of ballots being manipulated, I can't go along with that. And I'll tell you what,
does that
from
mean,
a common sense,
does that mean you're going to tell your people to take to the
street? It means you have a fraudulent election. You're
And what
sending
are you
out
gonna do?
80
And
million
what would you
ballots.
do about that?
They're not equipped to. These people aren't equipped to handle it. Number one. Number two, they cheat. They cheat. Hey, they found ballots in a waste paper basket 3 days ago, and they all had the name military ballots. They were military. They all had the name Trump on them.
Vice President
You think
Biden,
that's good?
Vice President Biden, final question for you. Will you urge your supporters to stay calm while the vote is counted, and will you pledge not to declare victory until the election is independently certified?
Yes, and here's the deal. We count the ballots, as you pointed out. Some of these ballots in some states can't even be opened until Election Day. And if there's thousands of ballots going to take
And also
time
that
to do it.
girl,
And by the way,
Ima
our
Omar,
military, they've
is
been
doing
voting
fraud,
by
giving
ballots
people
since at the end of the Civil War.
money for their votes,
And that's
not even
that's what's
filled out,
going to happen.
just
Why is
signed.
it not? Why is it for them somehow not fraudulent? It's the same process. It's honest. No one
It's
has
fraudulent
established
both
at
ways.
all that there is fraud related to
But those votes
mail-in
did get
ballots.
thrown out.
That somehow it's a fraudulent
It's
process.
on video
been
that they
established.
found them.
Take a look at Carolyn Maloney's race
I
in
asked
Manhattan.
you had an opportunity
Look
to
at
respond.
Carolyn Monroe.
Go ahead.
They have no idea what
Vice
happened.
President Biden, go ahead.
He has no idea what he's talking about. Here's the deal. The fact is, I will accept it, and he will too. You know why? Because once the winner is declared, after all the ballots are counted, all the votes are counted, that'll be the end of it. That'll be the end of it. And if it's me, in fact, fine. If it's not me, I'll support the outcome, and I'll be a president not just for the Democrats. I'll be a president for Democrats and Republicans. And this guy,
I want to see an honest ballot count.
Gentlemen, you say that's the end of it? This is the end of this debate?
Honest ballot count.
We're going to leave it there.
Too.
To be continued as in more debates as we go on. President Trump, Vice President Biden, it's been an interesting hour and a half. I want to thank you both for participating in the first of 3 debates that you have agreed to engage in. We want to thank Case Western Reserve University and the Cleveland Clinic for hosting this event. The next debate, sponsored by the Commission on Presidential Debates, will be 1 week from tomorrow, October 7th, at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. The 2 vice presidential nominees, Vice President Mike Pence and Senator Kamala Harris, will debate at 9 p.m. Eastern that night. We hope you watch. Until then, thank you and good night. Thank you.
Biden did better than I expected, but still, Trump kicked them out the water. Thank you for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, give it a thumbs up, join, do all that good stuff. Trump 2020. You want to even get him even crazier? Say 2024, 2028. How she's going to kiss him with a mask on? What kind of thing is that? My God. And Chris Wallace did a horrible job interrupting the president, but not Biden. Biden came out with some ridiculous attacks and ridiculous accusations, and he didn't let Trump respond. That was not fair. So like I was saying, good night. Thank you so much for watching in the watch party. See you next time. Make sure you like, subscribe, join, do all that good stuff. Make sure you comment. You know, the algorithm likes that. You know what I mean? Thank you.